Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. It's a quiet time for videos at the moment, and something I don't do very often because it takes a little bit of faffing around and setting up and whatever. Shortening the legs on the tripod and various means and devices to be able to get the camera close enough to my smaller blooms to get a nice sharp image. And I thought we'd have a look at the Restrepias that are in bloom at the moment. I think there's three definitely and possibly four. Depends what I find when I pick the plant up. It was in bloom when I watered it, but the blooms don't last a long time. But while we've got this one up, I thought Restrepias are probably orchids that people don't think about growing. They are a cooler grower, and they don't do very well in drier atmospheres. These are one of the ones that do like that humidity, and without it you can get sort of crinkling on the leaves where they don't develop nice and clean lines and things like that. So they do like a humid atmosphere. Don't like bright light. Now if you can provide that humidity, these will grow in the home. But the humidity is the problem in the home because of the dry air. So if you can get a little microclimate going, then these would grow quite well. Some of them do actually get quite large as plants. The blooms themselves are not very large. I'll see if I can put my finger near this one without touching anything, because if I touch something it'll go out of focus. So you can see by the size of my finger. This bloom, the actual part with the coloration on, is about 1.5 centimeters, maybe a little less, and then you get the strange antennae sticking out in all directions. They have a pretty similar look to them. The colours vary, the markings vary, but the overall shape is very similar for all of them. You could probably say that about most orchid genera, with the exception of some of the big ones. If you take dendrobiums, the variety of bloom shapes in that genus is extraordinary, from large to minute, all different colours. But then it's a big genus, so you know. Restrepias, lots of hybrids around. The hybridisation has managed to get bigger blooms. The patterning on some of the species is maintained through the increase in size, and most of the hybridisation, quite honestly, has been trying to get larger blooms on plants that are less reliant on those precise environmental conditions, so they're a bit more tolerant, shall we say. And the Eric Young Foundation's been doing a lot of work to achieve those goals. I'll do pop-ups for the names to save me, because if I try and get the tag out of the plant I'll move it, and if I move it it'll go out of focus. So quite a precise thing for this camera to get in that close. Everything has to be dead still, so camera on the tripod, no fans on, and plant dead still without being touched. Right, so that's that one. Okay, this next one, you can see the coloration on this one is quite different to the last one. This has got a sort of yellowy bronzy background and then very, very distinct stripes. But the closer inspection of the stripes, they're made up of dots joined together. So they're not really a stripe. Now this one is one of the larger ones. This is an Eric Young Foundation one. You can see this one's considerably bigger than the previous one. So one of the Eric Young crosses. And most of the crosses, if you come across Restrepias for sale and they look like they've got quite big blooms, if the name has a French twang to it or a French look or feel to it, the chances are it's come from the Eric Young Foundation. Most of their hybrid names have a French appeal, shall we say. I mean, the Eric Young Foundation is on one of the Channel Islands, Jersey, I believe, and although they're sort of associated with Great Britain, they are very close to the French coast. So they ought to be French really, but they have a French influence. Anyway, so that's this one. One of the larger ones. Had this plant a while. I actually got this from Peter White, from the guy from from Orchid Accessories, and he had a tray full of them at one of our shows. And I had a look at the names in passing. I wasn't really interested in getting any more Restrepias, and I looked at the names and I said, "These are sort of a bit Frenchy, aren't they?" And he sort of put his hand across his mouth and said, "Yeah, they came out of the Eric Young Foundation." And I said, "How exactly did they get out?" And he said, "We don't ask those sort of questions." Because basically it's a foundation, they don't sell plants. Plants do get out of there on occasions, but you know, it's not a frequent thing. You can visit there, you can go and look round the nurseries and everything and have a tour and all that sort of stuff, but you won't come out with any plants, I don't think. Or it's a rare occurrence. I've also known Burnham's got some Miltoniopsis from the Eric Young Foundation, so they've got some out at some point. I don't know whether they went over and got them, but I don't know. Anyway, this is one of theirs. So that's that one. And this last one, again, is a reasonable size. I wouldn't say it's a tiny one. This is a relatively recent one. In fact, probably the most recent Restrepia that I bought. This came from Burnham's round the back in the private sector. I think they've actually put some out in the public sales part of the nursery since then, so others may have this one. But it's possibly one of Burnham's own, because although it's got a species name, it specifically said on the tag that it was a hybrid. And what that normally means is that a bloom has been pollinated, but the pollen came from a plant unknown. And although the other plants in the vicinity were the same species, there was no guarantee because it wasn't manually operated. If you want to get insect pollination and still guarantee it, then you have to isolate the plants. So like in an enclosed space, you'd have several of the species, and then when a pod appears, when a bloom becomes pollinated, the pollen can only have come from that species. That's a guarantee then. But in an open nursery, you can't have that guarantee, and without the guarantee you can't class it as the species, because there is no guarantee. If you're producing from seed. If you're dividing the plant, then it's the same plant, isn't it? So this one came from Burnham's, and it may well be one of their own seed pods that they've, produced the seeds into a flask and then got them out into the nursery and planted them up. And that may well be the case, because there was a set of these together in that private area. And if none of them had been in bloom, I'd have walked straight past. But the bloom caught my eye. And this one is lovely deep coloration on it. Very, very good colours on this one. And again, the stripes are made up of dots. But as you can see on this, the deepest purple on the very edge near the top, just before the colour changes to that cream colour, that creamy coloured band across the top. And what I'm going to do now is I'll do it with the camera not recording, because I want to try and get a different type of close-up, but it's going to mean faffing around, so I'll be back. Okay, so I've zoomed in on the bloom slightly at an angle so that I'm not looking at it head on. And the reason I want to do that is because although this is a strange shape, you've got one of those antennae pointing straight at the camera, so it's actually out of focus because it's too close. Then you've got the one going off to the left and the vertical one, which is the one that's wider and has some patterning on it, is sometimes transparent with coloured stripes. It does vary. But although this is an incredibly weird shaped plant, it still has the same component parts as the other orchids you're used to. I can hear you saying, don't be stupid. Yes, it has. That's why I needed to get in close. Now, as we know, we've got 3 sepals, 2 petals, and an evolved petal that is the lip. That's the component parts of orchid blooms, yeah? So if we think about this particular plant, where are those parts then? Well, basically the lip is the tiny little bit in the centre that's just a plain colour, yeah? So that's the lip. And then the sepals are the bit sticking up in the air at the back and the bit underneath the lip with all the bright colours on, which in fact are 2 sepals fused together. So the one sticking vertically upright and the 2 with all the colours on fused together are the 3 sepals. So where are the petals then? That's the 2 antennae, the 2 tiny little thin ones, these. So it still conforms to the component parts of a normal orchid. Well, what you would call a normal orchid, the ones we're used to seeing, let's put it that way. So we don't usually get the chance to get in this close. Now there's a fascinating thing about these that was discovered using a micron electroscope, is that what they're called? Where you get down so close that things are unrecognisable. And a lady I know that did a talk at Bournemouth had discovered this using the electron microscope. That's what I'm getting to. That's what she was using. And it's always been, people have always been fascinated by why these blooms are as they are. You know, well, evolutionary process and all that sort of stuff, but why? And they actually discovered that obviously the coloration of the 2 fused sepals are going to be a guide for pollinators attracted by the colour. And they also provide a landing platform, something to actually land on. So yeah, well, that's reasonable. Most people would probably have come to that conclusion. But the other bit is quite fascinating. The sepal at the back and the 2 petals form a triangulation basically, and they have nodes on the end of them, all 3 of them. So that particular sepal and the 2 petals have a node on the end. And under the electron microscope, it became visible that there were things, I don't know what they're called, these have all got scientific names sort of thing, but places where things like pheromones would be passed out. You know, like bees, for instance, and moths and things like that. They give off a pheromone to attract a mate. Yeah? Well, these 3 points actually give off an essence of some description. And you sort of think, well, surely they're heading off into space. The thing is, they come out in like a funnel shape, gradually spreading out as it heads away from the plant, if you can imagine that. So you've got 3 points forming a triangle, the points of a triangle, giving off an essence in a funnel shape. What happens in the very centre of those 3 points? All 3 of those funnel shapes cross over. So in the centre of the 3 points, it's an awful lot stronger than at the 3 points or anywhere else. And that point is often directly above the centre of the plant. So it's another way that it's actually attracting the pollinator to the centre of the plant, and then the colours enhance that, you know, well, oh, there's something going on here that's interesting, so it enhances that, and then you've got somewhere to land with the two sepals that are fused together. Now, this is recent stuff. You won't find this in a book, unless Helen has actually written one. Anyway, just a bit of science behind some of the reasoning and the logic as to why this bloom has that shape. There is a purpose behind it. It's funny, at that talk, it was viewed by somebody else in the audience that, you know, how can an evolutionary process come up with an idea like that? And I looked up and I said, well, it might not have finished. You know, just because we've started looking into evolution as a species, it doesn't mean to say it stops. You know, it's probably still going on in the background. And probably will carry on long after we're gone. Right, so that's Restrepias. Don't like to dry out, very fine root systems, don't like big chunky media. They like, you know, a nice fine media to go with their fine root system. I've got mine in my Let's Grow Roots type mix, so small bark, some perlite and some broken up sphagnum moss, those that have been repotted since I started doing that anyway. And they don't like to dry out. Their roots are incredibly fine. If they dry out completely, especially if the temperatures are a bit warmer than they ought to be, the roots will die. And that can happen quite quickly, so you've got to go careful. And they do like that extra humidity in the air. It's not compensation for the media drying out. That won't work. It's a combination of the two. They have to be hydrated at the roots and they need reasonable humidity. I am just about, excuse me, getting away with the humidity here, because remember it's quite a bit lower in this place compared with what it used to be. But then it also used to be far too warm for these, so they weren't doing as well as they are now. They are an interesting thing to grow. And when the circumstances are right, they bloom constantly. They'll just keep blooming. Now I'm just going to shut the camera off so that I can get the zoom reset and get it on my hand so that I can look at some other things and talk about some other things. So here we go. Right, I just needed to be able to look round the plant itself. Now you can see that this bloom, and where the previous one was, comes out from the base of the leaf. Now under normal circumstances that would hang down below the leaf. So why was that one above the leaf? Well, because I put it there. Can't see it very well down there, can you? But that's where they bloom from. There's another bud here not opened yet. Yeah, they come from the base of the leaf. And they leave a tatty bit behind. So you can see from this leaf here that it's bloomed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 times from the same leaf. Same again here with this tangled mess, and again here with this tangled mess. That's what they do. This is what a nice shiny fresh leaf looks like. As is that. As is that. This is what a leaf looks like if either the air is too dry or it's not hydrated well enough at the base. Why have I got those 2 leaves on there? They were the first 2 leaves to appear after it had been repotted, and I suspect that the roots were not functioning adequately enough. So they've got this crinkled appearance, and why these leaves are split in 2 was because I tried to uncrinkle them to see if they would spread out flat, and ended up splitting the leaf. So I did that. That's not natural. But they put out new growths from anywhere across the base of the plant. And under normal circumstances, the leaves last quite a long time, but they do eventually die. The other thing you might get, I bet I haven't got one on this plant because I want to show you. No, I haven't. Where these blooms come out at the base of the leaf, you will on occasions get a new plant. So you'll get a leaf come out instead of a bloom. And they can be grown on as entirely separate plants. They are, by all definitions, a kiki. Strictly speaking, they're not a kiki, they're a plant excuse me, a plantlet. But they will grow new plants from the base of the leaf from the same place that the blooms come out. So there we go, that's a chat about Restrepias and some close looks at the blooms I've got. It's a pity the other one wasn't in bloom because the other one is a bright yellow one. But the blooms on that are tiny. They are very difficult to film. And the bloom that was out when I watered it has just gone over, literally, probably yesterday. So I couldn't film that one. Yeah, I find them interesting enough to have them around. I don't want loads and loads of them. If you're interested in getting some Restrepias for your collection, Burnham's have probably got the largest selection that you'll come across anywhere. They do have a large selection to choose from, and that is quite a good range of species and a good number of hybrids thrown in there, and they tend to be in different sized plants at different prices. So a recently split up plant, the smaller pieces go very cheap, and then obviously once they grow on the next year the size is that much bigger, they'll be a bit more expensive. Their specimen plants don't normally come up for sale, so you know, the really big, and most of the big ones are not out in the nursery, they're in the back hidden from view, which is where this one came from. Right, okay, so a few close-ups just for a change, and I'll see you next time.